Here we go. Are you guys still feeling okay? How's the energy level? Amazing. Very good, very good, very good. Well, these two last sessions of the day are going to be jam-packed, so you better have your notebooks ready, or maybe just, have that Red Bull in hand, or whatever else keeps your attention going to learn from all the fabulous panelists that I'm about to call up. The next session is about Agile and how you can adapt Agile for game development. I think every studio that I've ever worked at had Agile in some form, but never in the same form, because just taking the Agile manifesto straight off doesn't always work that well for games. It is iterative, yes, but there are different gates, and we gotta ship eventually and that kind of stuff, right? This topic will be moderated by Jenny Österlund. She's a veteran from Paradox who started her own company where she's providing consultants to game studios called Game Boost about 2 years ago. She's growing quickly. I also heard she's starting a dating app lately, so I'm going to talk to her about what that's up later on. And she will be joined in this topic by our expert panelists, Virginia Boyero from Sharkmob, Jade Skullman from Brink Games, Magdalena Björkman from Rover, and Helena Sokol from Flashbulb Games. Welcome.
Hi guys. Nice to see you all here. Well, I can't really see you, but I can hear you, so I know you're there. So, hello. Really excited to be here because this is one of my favorite topics. When I started in games 12 years ago, I think it was at Paradox, and I came from being an Agile coach in software development. So I started, and we started using Agile on my studio up in the northern of Sweden. And when headquarters heard what we were doing, I got invited to go down to Stockholm and hold a master course for them, the producers down there, on how we had adopted Agile for our game development. So that was 12 years ago, and I think the topic is still pretty much active. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm going to introduce these lovely ladies because I'm super excited to be sharing stage with them. They are not only really, really good game producers, but they also have a background and knows Agile from other industries, which I think is good when we're talking about adopting it for our industry. But before we go into anything, when we say Agile, we don't mean Scrum or Kanban, we mean the whole shebang. The framework, the tools, the methods, everything that goes in there. So we're not going to talk Scrum specific. Cool. So here I have Virginia. She is a game producer and project manager committed to creating processes that enables her team to consistently create their best work. So she comes from localization, and she has a wide experience in the full content pipeline and strong interest in the convergence of digital humanities and video games tech. I feel that is a talk in itself, maybe.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, maybe, yeah. Perhaps. Thank you for the introduction.
Cool. Then we have Jane. She's a producer with 10 years of experience in development and agile transformation. So she's been at Star Stable and Brink Gaming, and she takes a down-to-earth, result-focused approach to Agile, helping teams stay flexible and build ways of working that actually fits how games get made. So also interesting. Then we have Magdalena, or Magda. She is a producer and team coach with a passion for building creative teams and sustainable organizations. She's currently helping shape the production at Rover Game. It's a startup. And she loves building systems that support both great games and the people who make them. Last, but definitely not least, we have Helena. She's a senior producer currently at Flashbulb Games. She has 5 years of experience in creative management within game development. So she has a focus on empathy and facilitation when building processes. And she likes to empower her teams to grow together and create frameworks for making great games. So very, very strong panel, you guys. I think big hands for them. Yes. So before we go into the actual goodness of Agile, we're going to touch briefly on, when maybe it doesn't work so much, so the anti-patterns of Agile. So if you want to start, Helena, when would you say that Agile maybe doesn't work so well for games?
Well, I think that we can start by just defining anti-patterns a little bit, because it's not only what doesn't work, it's when what you think that you're doing well, but you're actually maybe hurting a little bit more than you think you are. I think one of the things that I've learned, at least, is, for example, keeping stand-up is a great thing and a great practice, but it can very quickly sort of become this chat where you're not really getting the right information. It should, of course, be, what you did today, what you did yesterday, and what's blocking you, but, somehow it just can turn into this hour-long, talk about random stuff. So I think that's like one of the first things that you can say, okay, this is a cornerstone and you need to keep it really, really brief.
Right, cool. Do you want to add something, Magda? When have you found that going Agile by the book maybe isn't the best?
Yeah. So my favorite anti-pattern of Agile, and you might be familiar with this term, is Agile transformation. Have you ever heard that? So when a company decides it is time to change something, we want to adopt Agile. We're going to do Agile transformation. And at the end of this transformation, we'll be Agile, we'll be strong, everything is going to be amazing. It's usually a bit of a red flag because it's not a 0-1 state. You're not Agile and you're fully Agile. Companies are in a constant state of evolution and transformation. So seeing it as a 0-1 state, it's we're bad, but then we'll adopt Agile and everything will be rosy. This is a very destructive pattern of thinking. It is better to plan it according to your needs, according to where you're at in your process, and to see what things you can actually adapt from the super wide Agile toolbox and Agile frameworks that actually suits you and that can take you one step further along your path. So the transformation is constant. It's not just you transform and you're Agile and now you're good to go for the rest of eternity, which I've seen in gaming as well.
Cool. So far the anti-patterns are more of, keep the Agile, not try to do weird stuff with it.
Keep it sensible.
Yeah. Jane, do you have anything you want to add to the anti-patterns?
Yeah, adding to sort of the transformation and then also saying that we should go Agile. And in that, we talk about Agile, but we don't do Agile. So we have all the ceremonies, but we really don't know why we are on the stand-up, or the stand-up starts to become something else. So a bit of both, where we see, we think we're doing Agile, but we're actually not getting the benefits of doing Agile. And some other example is to have all the meetings just for the sake of the meetings. Yep. So the complaint gets, but Agile is just meetings. We're meeting and meeting and meeting. We're never doing something. So, and that is not the point of Agile, to have a lot of meetings.
So you mean if we cross off all the Agile activities, we don't win?
Exactly. Unfortunately,
we have to make a game.
It would be really nice if you had the list with checkboxes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So we were at lunch and we were talking a bit about the Agile Manifesto. And just out of curiosity, can we have a raise of hand? How many in here knows what that is and have read it? So maybe half, would you say? Yeah.
That's still good.
That is still good, but for those of you who haven't, I suggest you look it up if you want to work Agile, because that is sort of what we're talking about. It's sort of the end goal of what you're trying to achieve with all of these meetings and other things that we have. Cool, but if we move on to the more good part, the parts that actually help us, so we have a lot of different phases. We have concept, pre-prod, production, live. So can we work Agile the same in all of these phases, or do we need to sort of adapt to the phases of game development? Virginia, do you want to?
Yeah, so tying up a bit with the what doesn't work, I think what does work is when it can be seen something agile in itself, when you can adapt it to either the department or the phase in the project where you're at. and you actually take the value what these meetings are supposed to bring. So it's the close collaboration, interdisciplinary. I think that works very well when trying to make quick prototypes and trying them on very quickly, getting the right departments to talk constantly and to not get stuck, to have a very clear goal, and then to review it very rapidly. I think that's one of the times when it works the best, and it's adapted to like what the team needs, what at that time the project needs, and it gets good momentum, I think.
Cool. Do you have anything, Jane, on how to adapt it for different phases?
Yeah, I think if we stick with 4 phases, probably you have different phases, but discovery, pre-production, production, and post-production. I think for discovery, Agile, the Agile mindset of iterate, experiment, learn is really good. Maybe adding a deadline to it, maybe not that good, because you never know where fun when does fun happen, or when do we have a good player experience. So similar to what you said, partially taking some of the Agile principles and using them in the different methods. Pre-production, I would like to add more of a testing mindset, experiment a lot, put it in front of players early. That is sort of user feedback, if you read sort of the manifesto and the principles, and collaborate across. And a collaboration doesn't just mean within the craft, it also means with stakeholders, with players, and so forth. And production is maybe where it becomes a bit more streamlined, and then we use more of the rituals. Sort of we have locked down the scope in pre-production. We know about the scope and trying to stick to the scope in order to sort of keep the deadline. And talking about deadline, I sort of want to share a misunderstanding maybe, or an anti-pattern that having deadlines is not non-agile. It's actually adapting the scope to the deadline. And then you of course can argue then you maybe lose the fun because you need to de-scope a lot of the things in it. And that's where I like to work with milestone. And sort of the earlier we can find out that we don't have the time to deliver everything that we have thought of, the better. So having milestones where we have locked on the core, and now we're adding to the core, and then it's easier to de-scope if still can keep the deadline, but maybe not deliver the full chunk that we thought of.
Yeah, it is a little bit strange, that idea of agile, because I heard that a lot as well, like, but you have a plan, then you're not agile. Whereas I'm like, well, we have a plan, but then we can change it. We react to change. Have you ever gotten that?
Yeah, I mean, I can add to it that although in Agile we say like, oh, if there's a deadline, it's not Agile, but Agile uses time boxes all the time. So I do like to reframe deadlines like in game production as time boxes, like we have our milestone, this is our box, like this is our constraints, and then it's up to us what we put into this box and how we use it. And that's like just this reframe can a bit liberate our way of thinking and make it like not this deadline, we're dead if we don't deliver until this line, but this is our container, and then when we put in it, this is what we can figure out and be creative about it as well.
Cool. I'm pretty relieved that we're not dead if we don't deliver on the line. Good to know. So I also heard that, when we move into beta, more or less, then we can't be agile anymore. Then we have to go into waterfall because we have to sort of just produce. Is that true?
I think that then we move into having sort of reading our teams a little bit better. I was working with an art team who really liked to have everything planned out. And they would like to see all of the assets that it needs to produce, and they just needed to get a check from the designers, and then they could start just waterfalling it down. And I think as soon as you move into beta, you should have an idea of some of the designs that are,
that should be done, and some of the features so that other teams can start. And it might not be that you're not agile anymore, but you're still trying to iterate on what you've done and what you need to do with design, basically. I think that it's, that's where the point where you have to read your team really well and see who want to iterate and do we still have the time to do it.
I can continue, and let's see if I get my thoughts straight here. But in beta, you should adapt to. If you're in open beta, you should adapt to the player feedback.
So very agile then.
Yes, so then you're very agile. But you maybe are not straying away from the vision. So it also depends, what do you adapt? Is it sort of more of tweaking the balancing in the gameplay? Is it about giving more freedom for players if it's a sandbox, or sort of tweaking a bit, but you're not straying away from the vision or sort of the initial direction? That would be very expensive. And then talking about art, if we need to redo the concept art from the beginning, then you're like starting a new game. So in that sense, yes, you shouldn't use agile just to throw everything away, which is not agile anyway, but sort of adapting to player feedback and the player experience.
Yeah, I think it also naturally goes with like at the in the earlier phases, like you're figuring out the design, you're trying out, you're setting the structure of the game, and then in the end, it's the tail end departments are more waterfall, so it also fits that it doesn't have to move in with the same rhythm, with the same framework that it was used at the beginning. And yes, in the adapting to player feedback, into director feedback, in that sense, it still needs very rapid iteration, but the later departments like audio, like cinematics, often they're still working. And it is a fairly known, streamlined pipeline that doesn't always fit as well with Agile.
All right. Cool. So here's another question for the audience. How many here work in a team where you work Agile? Also sort of half, maybe it's the same half that actually read the manifesto, so maybe it works out. Cool. Cool. So do you think this is good or bad? Because in games we have a lot of different platforms, different genres, team sizes, team compositions, like there is a big variety. So can we do Agile across the board, or does it work especially good for some platforms or team sizes or genres? Or
I think as long as you're a team below like 10 people, I think you can actually, you don't necessarily need to use Agile because you're still such a small team. There's limited communication, pathways. As soon as you get over 10 people, suddenly, one person doesn't know what you tell the other person, and you don't have the same information. And I think that's where Agile can really help you sort of stay focused. And I think that if you have a really big team and you have smaller teams within that, I think that Agile can set the directions and can help you work together with different teams and different disciplines in a really big way, because it is not only about the processes, it's also about just having a focus on everybody knowing the same things and knowing where we're going. I think that's would be my suggestion. Like below 10, you can maybe work without Agile, but above that.
Okay, but all the platforms, new game, franchise, genres, we can all do Agile.
Yeah, I think it becomes easier if it's a franchise, I think. Well, maybe Magda, you have something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Agile, if you see Agile as a mindset and you come from the values and then you go to the very broad toolbox, then you can be Agile in almost any environments, like maybe when there is a bit more like regulation and there are like products that are more medical equipment, then you can be less agile. But when it comes to games, like usually we still have flexibility to be agile in different scales, but maybe, for example, not always do Scrum, which a lot of people kind of equate agile to Scrum, which is like, oh, if you do stand-ups, if you do retros, if you have sprints, then you're agile, which is not the case. But if you do iterative production, if you do like discovery, delivery kind of together, and if you do incremental development and hypothesis-driven development and all of these things, then you're still agile without maybe having the rituals. And I think, like you say, if you're below 10 people, then you don't need agile. I think that's also because when you're below 10 people, usually you're just kind of agile by design, because you talk every day to these people, you test your game every day, so you're actually living by the principles and by the values of agile without calling it agile. And then when it scales, it's just very hard to maintain this momentum. And then we need to use a little bit more of the framework, of the tools, to kind of make sure that the way that we love doing things actually scales. And I think this is agile for me. In the end, it's like this loving way of scaling the small startup feeling, where you actually do everything together, you test, you do incremental development, and that's kind of a way of scaling it through values, through principles. So it is good for any environment. However, of course, like if you have, for example, a mobile live game, you do continuous deployment, then it's a lot easier because you have a lot more flexibility. And then when you move to less flexible environments, you have deadlines, you have AAA developments, you suddenly have 300 people that need to know what they're doing more or less every day, and you have like tight budgets, then maybe you need to be a little bit more creative and figure out like which context can use different agile tools.
Cool. Virginia, do you want to add something?
I would like to. I just wanted to say on the bigger teams and on the bigger projects, the way I have been running it, or the way I've seen it, it's in a per department case, adapting, taking what brings value, and then putting it into the team to make it run better. So it doesn't have to be, in the case of it not being multidisciplinary, one thing that worked better for me was making it more as a Kanban style, using it more like the team is a service for the rest of the game, and then using the Kanban board as these are the things that are ready, this is what we're going to work on next, rather than having a pre-planned week or 2 weeks, because we couldn't know what was going to be available. So that worked well, and it gave enough visibility to the team internally, and it kept like the requests that we were getting from the project going as well. So it just needs to be adapted to the size of like what you're managing, and then it doesn't really matter like how the other teams are running it.
Okay, cool. So what I'm hearing, I'm going to let you also have a word, but what I'm hearing so far is that we can basically do agile in all types of game development. We just have to be a little bit flexible or agile, if you will, with the tools and methods that we use for different teams. Yeah? All right, what do you want to...
Yeah, I think as the agile facilitator, you really need to know your tools, and retro is a tool, planning is a tool, and even if you call it a milestone or sprint planning or whatever, is a tool. The stand-up in itself in its tool, and if you understand, for example, retro is about improving both ways of working, but also outcome. So if you had a play test for an open audience, then you can do retro and learn from that play test. You can even not call it retro either if you don't want to. So that is not important. But sort of, what does the ceremony what is the intent of the ceremonies? And with that said, also when you scale sort of the team, I think communication becomes really, really crucial. And one sort of lesson learned from having teams that needs to collaborate, that has dependencies to each other, is that they need to know how the other one is working. So if you have different cadence, if you have different pace, if you also have slightly different methods, that for some discovery is more important because you are in a phase where you are exploring territory, and for some you are more of have a content pipeline where stuff is sort of the same. Let's call it an art pipeline where something is sort of similar. It's really good that those two different teams that has dependency to each other knows about the other sort of way of working. And I think so communication, some sort of handshake of I understand how you're working and how I can deliver and I can talk to you becomes really, really important.
Cool. I have a good example of a team that on the surface was waterfall, but actually I think they were very agile. It was an art team, and it was 12 artists, and they were just doing characters, only characters. So each artist had their own little slot from concept to animation and VFX and all of that, and they were handing over each character through this very waterfallish process. However, they loved their retrospectives. They were I was agile coach there, and they were we need to have our retrospectives, but they need to be very effective. So we did half an hour retrospectives, 12-person team, but they were super effective. They had this incremental improvements every sprint, basically. Plus, how I helped them, for example, as agile coach, was that they needed to work together with other teams and not only hand over the characters, but sometimes maybe a particular artist or another was needed for a different part of the company to actually embed these characters into a new feature or do some ideation with other teams. So I help facilitate this coordination and collaboration of this team with other teams. So in my eyes, they were very agile, although if you just look at their board, it was very kind of by design waterfall.
Yeah, I think you're right. To build a little bit on that, and also what you said, that you need to be aware of, why are you doing the ceremonies of Agile? I used to work as a sort of an agile firefighter of a sort. I go into teams that it wasn't really working for them, and most of the time I found that it was because they were just running the ceremony, doing the activities, but they didn't really know why are we doing this. Well, what is it that's going to come out on the other side? So you can be very agile. You don't have to call it Scrum or retro or whatever. If you live the values and if you know why you're doing it, I agree. I think you're agile then.
I think it's also about being reacting on the feedback that you get throughout a retrospective, because if you just have the retrospectives and nothing happens from them, this is I think the most frustrating thing that you can do to a team as a producer. I think that you have to collect everything. You have to see the patterns of the feedback. Somebody will say I really don't like this process, and you've heard this before, but in a different shape. Then you're going to say, okay, this is something that I need to do something about. So I think it's really, really important that the team feel listened to and they know that this is going to be actionable.
Yes. Again, we don't win if we do the activity. We win if we get value from it, I think. But here comes a question that I find interesting, because especially for gaming, because we are a very, very creative industry. We have to create something out of nothing. And on top of that, that something also needs to be fun. So we need a lot of creativity. We sort of count on our people to bring that creativity to the table. Does Agile help boost that creativity that we need? So, Helena, do you want to have a stab at it?
Yeah. So I think that it creates a really good and solid framework for the creative people to know where they're going, because with so many ideas on the table, it can be really difficult to know how to prioritize your things, which ideas are good, what should I do to unblock my teammate. And I think if you have a sandbox of for you to play in, but you have really good framework, then you can let yourself go within this framework really safely and really comfortably. It's only if it gets stifling, if you have all these meetings, if you use all your time on the rituals and not on the game, that it becomes really bad for creativity, I would say.
Cool. Magda, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, what I was thinking when you were saying it, I mean, one thing about Agile that definitely supports creativity is like the cross-collaboration and like cross-functional teams. But then I remembered that I had like some people in my teams that were almost like, we don't want to be creative anymore, we just want to code or do art. And that's also something like, you know, there is a balance between being creative and being involved in like ideation and going through like design sprints and all of that, but also being able to just say, oh, this sprint I'm doing this, these are my goals. And this is also something for like a producer or coach to support the team with, to kind of adjust what we are doing to their needs and to project needs, and make sure that we know where to do what and when we can be creative in a way that actually suits us and is best for the project, which can be different ways.
Yeah, I think one thing to add is on the sprint cadence, planning also for the element of fun, for like testing that the thing that comes at the end of the sprint is fun, and taking that moment to like pause and reflect. Like, is this not just like all the tasks are complete, everything fits in? Like, is it actually working together? Is it fun? Like, where do we bring it next? And sometimes that can be done like within the sprint, but sometimes there's also the need to have one in between, where just like evaluation and testing and review and really steer it where it needs to go next. I think that brings a lot of value for the team that are working on the tasks, and also gives the visibility and the opportunity for directors to feedback and to like direct, course correct if needed.
Yeah, I think that I was working on a project where we had, every Friday we would have show and tell, and we would physically go from computer to see what they were working with.
We do that now.
And it's amazing because you can see both like tools, you can see these like cool assets, you can see, oh, I've just been doing like really nice documentation. You know, it's a really valuable tool for us to, you know, support each other and to acknowledge each other's work.
Yeah, people are good at pretending that they like seeing my tables and timelines.
I'm gonna have to cut you short because we are running out of time. So, but as promised, we will end with one concrete tip from all of you that you can, you know, try when you get back. And if Marie lets us, we might have one or two questions as well. She says thumbs up, so we're good. So, yeah, give us your best tips on how to adopt Agile to fit the game development. Start with you there. Yeah.
I love Miro, and I have set up my retrospective in Miro where I also I tell people that they can put little stickers on it. I can, you know, we do it with sticky notes, and as a way of visualizing what I'm going to do about all of this feedback, I put it down underneath in what has sort of started, what has been done, and what has yet to be done. So you can always see, okay, your feedback is being heard. And like these are the things that we've already achieved. And I can also use that for the post-mortem because I have all this feedback that I can categorize into different categories, and we can sort of see where the biggest problems were or biggest challenges.
Thank you.
So I'm cheating because I actually have 2 tips.
As long as you're fast.
Okay, I'm fast. So my first tip, don't adopt Agile. Adopt Agile. So make sure that you know your context, that you know what you need, and adapt Agile. Like, know all the tools, learn everything that you can from other stuff as well, like PMP, like whatever, project management, and then adapt what you need to your particular conditions. So not adopt, adapt. And second, small tip, reframe why, like why are we doing stand-ups? Why are we doing retrospectives? Why do we need it for? To what for? Like, what for do we do stand-ups? Because then you kind of come up with the outcome and you already have a measure of success. Like, what for are we doing stand-ups? We do it for this, this, and this, and then you can actually check, is it fulfilled or not? And you already can iterate on it in the future. So these are my 2 tips.
Good tips, good speed also.
I think don't assume that everyone knows Agile when you try to sort of roll it out, or you want your team to do Agile. So talk to people and ask them, do you like Agile? Do you not like Agile? What do you like with Agile? And so forth. So have a bit of maybe one-on-one or team talks. Also not just talk to the team, talk also to the team's teams, talk to the team's stakeholder, so they also understand the Agile process and what they can expect and what they gain from Agile. So I agree with everything you said, but take everything that Magda said to the stakeholders as well.
For me, I really like the stand-ups. So the tip would be keep them short, but keep them on point, and update the board at the same time. So I like to give a 30 seconds up to a minute per participant, not wait for latecomers. So we're making it into what it needs to become. And then at the end of the stand-up, we have an updated board. And if there's blockers, we know what to talk about, but separately.
Cool, perfect, thank you. Well, my best tips is baby steps, especially if you are in a team that's new to Agile, because if you've done your homework, like Magda said, you learn the tools, the processes, you know everything. You're light year ahead of everyone else. So you know sort of where you want to end up, but maybe start implementing baby steps so they can keep up with it. Can we still do a question? Yes? All right, so now we are doing questions. I think we have someone that's going to walk around. Does anyone have a question? Yes, we do.
How do you avoid scope blowout with Agile method? Because that's been my experience kind of with the quote-unquote our Agile development, which probably wasn't implemented very well, but yeah, how do you avoid scope blowout, budget blowout, time blowout, etc.?
All right, who wants to answer?
I think that was a bit part of, I don't remember what I said anymore during the lunch, but scope creep and everything creep, I think something like that. And yes, working with other industries, there's not that much of scope creep, which is interesting. So it's actually more in games. So yes, it is something to keep your eye on, because everyone is creative. Everyone is passionate about what they're doing, which is good. We want to keep that. But we also want to deliver. So not sure if it's Agile per se that this is happening, but committing to the scope, and I think that is also the producer or any type of lead's role to explain why not everyone can have their idea in it. So it's not just stakeholders, everyone in the team, including the producer sometimes, adding to the scope. So I think I have to say you need to be harsh.
Yeah, and I think you need to have a longer-term vision as well. So the sprints are short-term and they accomplish something, but you need to know what that something is, and that is a defined goal from the start.
Right, so we're going with the tough love.
Yeah, I mean, I can add to it. It's like no matter whether you do Agile or anything else, there is going to be scope creep, because this is the industry we live in, and then you need to have tools to control it or to like manage it. And I think what you said before about this, like, oh, we have the budget and we have the time, and this is our time box, and within this we need to manage scope. Then there needs to be some people, guardians, executive producers, but also other people on the team that actually know what this is and what that means, and then we can do these exchanges. It's like, this is scope creep. That means that this other thing is being kicked out of the project. And then you also need to have tools to actually measure return on investment of different things. And then like player testing comes to like hypothesis-driven development, because then you can actually test which things are better to keep and which things need to get the kick. But nothing will just, there's no silver bullets. There's gonna be scope creep. You need to manage it in any methodology you have.
Someone once told me that if you allow people to come with suggestion on what to add, also ask them to at the same time say what to remove to get it in. So that makes them maybe think about not just adding.
Yeah.
No, I like that. Treat people like adults. So it's not like being harsh as telling your kid harsh. It's more like, this is the reality that we have. So I think that was a great example. So trade one thing for another.
Yeah. There we go. I think we have time for one more question.
Hello, I'm a teacher in game development, and you do agile in game projects and stuff. And I'm curious if you have any tips on how to deal with the rituals, the meetings, and everything when you have groups of where you have a very big gaps in both motivation and skill level within the same group, which can make the various meetings and stuff kind of tough.
Interesting.
I think that if you have very junior and very senior people on the same team, I think it's important not only to, of course, let everybody speak their mind, but also to make sure to say, okay, so if you want to add something as a junior, or you also have to have a solution for me to add it. Like, as a producer, I'm here to, of course, hear your ideas, but you need to make sure that you come to me with solutions as well. And I think in terms of motivation, that's a really hard one. But I think low motivation often is connected with, not understanding why we're doing things. So I think being clear on like, okay, we're gonna have these rituals and this is why we're having them, then I think you might be able to, raise that in motivation a little bit. But of course, as Jenny also said, like, or I don't know who said it, but like if you have too many meetings, you also need to evaluate like what are we actually talking about? Are we, discussing game design, or are we, having meetings about meetings, basically?
Yeah, I think it's a really good, in a way, situation to have, because this is what will happen in a team later. There are people there are interns, there are very senior people, there are people that have seen everything and they're just bored. So it's a very nice sandbox. And then I would treat it like similar like we do in a team. So if there are people that are kind of more know what's happening, let them be a bit of mentors to people that don't know. And then they also learn from their mentees, because this is going to be the situation that will be in the actual life in a team, and then maybe the mentee can in turn teach someone else. And then when it comes to motivation, then it is very interesting. I mean, there is definitely, I think that part of this sort of education, it could be like some coaching conversation and how to actually ask good questions and how to do peer coaching and how to have this little support system within the team so they can explore this and kind of come up with solutions together, how to deal with it, because usually there is some reason behind it. And this is also what will happen in a team. There's a lot of behavioral work when you're working with a team. So adding a bit of maybe knowledge how to deal with it and help, and then have them go with it, I think that could be a really interesting thing. Maybe you're doing it already.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, this was the end of this panel. I think most of us are going to stay around for a little while if you want to ask us stuff off stage. But otherwise, I think big round of applause for these absolute rock stars. Yay.
Well done, ladies. Thanks for all your deep knowledge. And I hope you all took notes, because this is stuff that you're not going to learn through reading some sort of manifesto. These are the war stories and experiences you only get from doing. So, let their learnings be your guide for the future. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you.
All right. You guys been brave troopers today. We have one more session before we're going to close it out and round it out for the first day of Nordic. That one will be about players and how they are the creators of the future, publishing their own stuff. But first, we're going to take a short little break before I bring you that one. So see you all back here in 15 minutes. Thank you.